During a stormy night in Atlanta, powerful CEO Cassandra Holt stops to help a struggling soldier, Ryan Tate, her long-lost childhood friend. As they reconnect, Cassandra learns Ryan was dishonorably discharged after a military cover-up involving her company's weapons. Realizing her trusted executive orchestrated the tragedy, Cassandra risks everything to expose the truth. Ryan is killed protecting the evidence, urging her to redeem herself. Cassandra confesses publicly, losing her empire but reclaiming her humanity. In the end, she honors Ryan's sacrifice, returning to her roots, a woman freed by truth, forgiveness, and the cleansing grace of rain. The rain came down in silver threads, slicing through the night like quiet grief. Atlanta's skyline shimmered in the downpour, each drop catching the pulse of the city lights before splintering into nothing. On Peachtree Street, a sleek black Mercedes slowed against the flood, its headlights gliding over the drenched asphalt like a ghost searching for something lost. Inside, Cassandra Holt sat in silence, her jaw tight, her mind far away from the glowing dashboard. 42 years old. CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the South. A woman who had built herself from scratch, brick by bitter brick. But tonight, even success felt thin, like a curtain over something hollow. She was returning from a late board meeting that had dissolved into politics and subtle betrayals. The kind that reminded her why she'd stopped trusting long ago. The wipers beat like a metronome to her thoughts. Sharp, mechanical, relentless. She had grown used to control, to precision. Every decision, every calculated move, each one earned her a seat among men who never thought she'd last a year. And yet, as thunder cracked above the skyline, something in her chest stirred, a familiar ache she had ignored for years. Then, in the sweep of her headlights, she saw him. A lone figure trudging through the rain, shoulders hunched beneath a heavy duffel bag, uniform darkened and plastered to his skin. The road was slick, dangerous. Cassandra's eyes narrowed. The soldier's steps faltered, his knee buckled. For a heartbeat, she thought she was imagining it, another ghost conjured by exhaustion. But then he fell, half on the curb, half in the street. Without thinking, she braked. Tires hissed. The car came to a stop beside him. Her driver turned to speak, but Cassandra lifted a hand. "I'll get him," she said. Her voice carried the authority of a woman who wasn't used to asking. She grabbed the umbrella from the passenger seat, pushed the door open, and stepped into the storm. The rain was cold, colder than it had any right to be. It soaked through her designer coat instantly, running down her temples and collarbone, blurring the edges of her perfectly curated world. She crouched beside the soldier. He was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair matted to his forehead, dog tags glinting faintly in the streetlight. His eyes were half open, dazed, lips trembling from the cold. Cassandra reached for his shoulder. "Hey, can you hear me?" He blinked. His gaze met hers, and for a flicker of a second, something electric passed between them. A recognition neither could name. "I'm fine," he rasped, trying to push himself up. His voice cracked under the weight of pride. "You're not," Cassandra said, her tone somewhere between command and compassion. "Come on." She motioned to her driver. Together, they lifted the man and guided him toward the car. The soldier stumbled, muttering apologies, his boots leaving dark trails on the wet pavement. When they reached the car, Cassandra ordered the driver to turn up the heat. The soldier hesitated before sliding in, his soaked uniform clinging to his frame. The smell of rain and mud filled the luxury interior, an intrusion of realness that Cassandra found oddly grounding. "Where are you coming from?" she asked, settling into the seat beside him. "Fort Benning," he said softly. "Or what's left of it." His laugh was humorless, brittle. "They discharged me last week." "Medical." Cassandra studied him. "You're injured." He shook his head faintly. "Not the kind you can see." There was silence then, thick, uneasy. The city outside blurred by, a cascade of colors against the rain. Cassandra glanced down at his hands, raw and trembling slightly. Something about them felt familiar. She pressed gently, her tone softening. "What's your name?" The soldier hesitated. "Ryan." A pause. "Ryan Tate." Cassandra froze. The name struck her chest like a sudden chord. Ryan Tate. The syllables rolled through her mind, stirring up memories she'd buried under years of ambition and distance. The driver's voice broke the tension. "Where to, ma'am?" Cassandra hesitated, still staring at the soldier beside her, the man who didn't yet seem to know he had just walked back into her life. "Take us to Holt Tower," she said finally. As the car moved, Cassandra turned slightly, watching Ryan's reflection in the window. He was looking out at the storm, lost in it. There was something in his profile, the defiance, the quiet exhaustion, that brought back the smell of old basketball courts and school hallways. Rain kept falling, harder now, like the world was trying to wash something clean. Cassandra's heartbeat quickened, though she didn't understand why. All she knew was this: fate had a cruel, beautiful way of circling back. And tonight, on a storm-swept street in Atlanta, it had found her again, in the shape of a soldier she once knew, though neither of them had yet spoken the truth. The city blurred behind them, lights melting into rain. Cassandra sat still, her mind echoing with the past, with the boy she'd once known before the world hardened her edges, before names like Tate became ghosts. Outside, thunder rolled low across the skyline. Inside, silence thickened. And somewhere deep within her, something long dormant began to stir, something like memory, something like guilt. She didn't know yet that this chance encounter would unearth a secret she'd spent half her life trying to forget. For now, she only knew the sound of rain, the tremor in the soldier's hands, and the haunting familiarity of his name. By the time the car pulled up to Holt Tower, her empire, her fortress, Cassandra's heart had already begun to fracture under the quiet weight of recognition. She turned to him once more, voice low. "You should get warm. We'll figure things out in the morning." Ryan looked at her then, really looked, his brow furrowing as if trying to piece something together. "I appreciate it," he said softly. "You didn't have to stop." Cassandra forced a faint smile. "Maybe I did." Neither spoke again. As the elevator doors closed around them, sealing out the rain, a single question pulsed through Cassandra's chest like thunder behind glass. What if fate didn't bring him back to her by accident? Morning light crept through the glass facade of Holt Tower, brushing against marble floors and echoing through the silence of Cassandra Holt's penthouse suite. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the city washed clean, gleaming beneath a fragile sun. But inside, the air still carried the heaviness of the night before, the kind that lingers after something unfinished has begun. Cassandra stood at the window, coffee untouched in her hand. Below her, Atlanta pulsed, cars threading through the streets, people moving in practiced rhythm. From this height, everything looked orderly, small, manageable. Exactly how she liked it. But the quiet breathing she heard from the guest room behind her was a reminder that not everything in her world could be controlled. Ryan Tate. The name still clung to her like a half-forgotten song. She hadn't slept much. All night she had replayed the moment she'd heard it, the flicker in her chest, the shiver of something she dared not name. Could it really be the same Ryan? The one from the neighborhood she'd fled at 17? The boy with the cracked sneakers and the reckless grin who used to walk her home from school through the rough edges of East Point? It had been 25 years. That boy would be long gone. The man in her guest room was weathered, haunted. His eyes carried wars far beyond anything she could imagine. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, she could still sense him. The same pulse, the same quiet stubbornness that once made her feel safe when the world around her was falling apart. She set the coffee down and turned. Ryan stood in the doorway, wearing a simple white t-shirt and a pair of borrowed joggers. He looked uncomfortable, as if the sleek modernism of her penthouse didn't know what to do with him. "Morning," he said, voice low. "Didn't mean to crash like that. Guess I was more worn out than I thought." Cassandra nodded. "You needed rest." She motioned to the breakfast bar. "There's coffee, if you want some." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks. Ma'am, I mean, Cassandra." The way he said her name, careful, respectful, struck her with a pang she hadn't expected. He moved slowly, as if still carrying invisible weight. She watched him pour coffee, hands steady but tense. There was a stiffness to his movements, the subtle discipline of someone who'd been trained never to take up too much space. "How long were you at Benning?" she asked. 12 years, he said. "Infantry mostly. Couple of overseas deployments. The last one didn't go well." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. "What happened after your discharge?" He shrugged. "You get used to being needed." Then suddenly you're not. That's the part they don't train you for. Cassandra studied him, the hard lines of his face, the quiet steadiness in his voice. He spoke like someone who had already lost more than most people ever would. I was heading to see an old friend, he said after a pause. Didn't make it far. Guess my luck ran out. Or maybe it changed, she said softly. Ryan looked up, meeting her eyes. You always talk like that. Like what? Like you already know the end of the story. Cassandra smiled, but there was something sad about it. When you fought for control your whole life, you start pretending you do. He nodded, seeming to understand more than she expected. For a long moment, they stood in silence, two people shaped by different kinds of battles, both pretending not to feel the gravity between them. Finally, Ryan broke it. You remind me of someone, he said. Cassandra's pulse quickened. Oh, yeah. He frowned slightly, lost in memory. A girl I knew growing up. Cassie Holt. Tough as nails. Used to fix her mama's car when the boys couldn't. Said she was gonna own the city one day. Cassandra's breath caught. And did she? He chuckled softly. I don't know. Lost touch when I enlisted. She probably moved on. People like her don't stick around places like ours. The air between them thickened, heavy with unspoken truth. Cassandra turned away, walking toward the window before her expression could betray her. She did, she whispered. Ryan tilted his head. Did what? Own the city. He froze. The realization rippled across his face, disbelief first, then dawning recognition. His voice came out in a whisper. Cassie. She turned slowly, her eyes bright but unflinching. It's been a long time, Ryan. He stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. The years fell away between them, the dirt roads, the laughter, the nights spent dreaming of escape. But now, standing in her glass tower, those memories felt like someone else's life. Damn, he murmured. You really made it. Cassandra's smile was faint, brittle. I did what I had to. Ryan's gaze softened. You always did. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the city below. Finally, he exhaled, the weight of nostalgia mixing with something tender, something fragile. You remember the last time we saw each other? Cassandra nodded slowly. You were leaving for basic training. You said you'd write. Ryan looked down. I did. A few times. But you never answered. She hesitated, guilt flickering across her face. I didn't get them. He studied her expression, then shook his head slightly. You did. But you were already moving on. The words landed like rain against glass, soft but cutting. Cassandra didn't argue. In truth, he wasn't wrong. She had built her empire brick by brick, each one laid over the silence of everything she'd buried to survive. Ryan leaned against the counter, eyes distant. You ever think about what it would have been like if we'd both stayed? Cassandra turned back toward the window, watching the sun break through the clouds. All the time, she said quietly. But then I remember why I left. He nodded, understanding too well. You were right to. They stood in silence again, the distance between them filled with years of lost letters, missed chances, and the echo of what could have been. Then Cassandra's phone buzzed on the counter, a sharp intrusion. She glanced at the screen. A board member's name flashed across it, followed by a message, urgent meeting. Investor threat. Duty called, as it always did. She looked back at Ryan, the conflict clear in her eyes. I have to go downstairs. There's a company matter I can't ignore. Ryan nodded. Of course. Stay here. Rest. We'll talk later. But as she stepped toward the elevator, Ryan's voice stopped her. Cassie, he said softly. She turned. Sometimes, he said, the past doesn't come back to haunt us. Sometimes it comes back to save us. She held his gaze for a long, silent second, long enough for something unspoken to stir between them, before the elevator doors closed and took her away. In the quiet that followed, Ryan turned toward the window, looking out at the city that had made her a legend. His reflection stared back at him, a soldier without a mission, standing inside a dream built by someone he used to love. He didn't know it yet, But beneath the glittering surface of Holt Industries, something darker waited, a secret that tied both their fates far tighter than either could imagine. The boardroom was all glass and glare, the kind of place where ambition shimmered sharp as a blade. Cassandra Holt stood at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her face composed into that familiar mask of grace and command. Around her, the city's light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making her look like a figure carved from power itself. But inside, she wasn't steady. Her mind was still back upstairs, with him. With Ryan Tate. He was alive. Real. Flesh and memory and everything she thought she'd buried under 25 years of strategy and survival. Ms. Holt, her CFO's voice broke through the fog, "We need your decision on the merger." Cassandra blinked, pulling herself back into the room. "Proceed," she said automatically. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled around the table. Screens flickered to life with charts and projections, but Cassandra's focus wavered. Behind every voice, she heard Ryan's, "Sometimes the past doesn't come back to haunt us. Sometimes it comes back to save us." She exhaled slowly. The words clung to her, unervingly gentle. Then her assistant entered, whispering something into her ear. Cassandra's expression didn't change, but her pulse quickened. A journalist, Marcus Vale, the name struck her, had been asking questions. About a military contract linked to Holt Industries. About a cover-up. About someone named Captain R. Tate. Her blood went cold. She dismissed the board with practiced calm. "We'll reconvene after lunch." When the room emptied, Cassandra stood alone, her reflection fractured across the windowpane. She pressed a hand to the glass, steadying herself. Captain R. Tate. Ryan. A chill ran through her. She left the boardroom, heels striking the marble like drumbeats of restraint. By the time she reached her private elevator, her composure had hardened again, that armor she'd spent decades perfecting. But underneath it, dread was blooming like ink in water. Upstairs, the penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. She called out softly, "Ryan." No answer. Her steps echoed as she moved down the hall. The guest room door was ajar. Inside, the bed was neatly made, the borrowed clothes folded. But on the counter, she saw it, a manila envelope, slightly damp at the corners from where a raindrop must have fallen earlier that morning. Her name was written on it in a rough, soldier's hand. Her chest tightened as she opened it. Inside were documents, medical discharge papers, photos from deployment, and a thin sheet stamped "Classified." Her eyes scanned the header, Operation Caliber Dawn, Contractor Partnership, Holt Defense Systems. A tremor passed through her hand. Her company. Her name. Cassandra sank into a chair, staring at the ink. Holt Defense, a subsidiary she had acquired years ago, one of a dozen faceless firms that fueled the military-industrial arm of her empire. She'd never looked too closely at their field operations. The profits were astronomical, and the contracts, all government-verified. Or so she believed. Her breath came shallow now as she flipped to the next page. A casualty report. Half the names blacked out. But one stood clear, Staff Sergeant Alan Vickers, deceased. And beneath it, a note, friendly fire incident, drone malfunction. Cassandra froze. Her company's drone systems. Her technology. And Ryan's name, Captain Ryan Tate, listed as the officer of command. A distant memory flickered. Years ago, the subsidiary's board had pushed a new defense contract through without her direct oversight. She'd been told it was a routine test operation. Nothing more. But this wasn't routine. This was blood. Her phone buzzed, a text from her assistant. Marcus Vale, waiting in the lobby. Claims he has information you'll want to see. Cassandra stared at the message, her pulse drumming in her ears. Moments later, she stood in the sleek, echoing lobby of Holt Tower. The man waiting for her was lean, mid-30s, with the self-assured calm of someone who already knew the truth. He offered a brief nod. "Ms. Holt, I appreciate your time. Make it quick." Marcus smiled faintly. "Then I'll be direct. 3 months ago, a leak surfaced from a defense testing site in Syria. A Holt-manufactured drone misfired during a civilian extraction. The Army classified it as mechanical failure, but some internal logs suggest manual override from an unlisted network." Cassandra's voice was steel. "And what does this have to do with me?" He met her eyes. "The override came from Holt Defense's internal servers. Someone within your corporation authorized that launch. And one of the men blamed for the incident, Captain Ryan Tate, took the fall. He was discharged, dishonorably, after refusing to name the source of that override." The air in her lungs vanished. Marcus continued, "He's been living off the grid since. Until, apparently, last night." His eyes flicked toward her, studying her silence. "You've seen him, haven't you?" Cassandra didn't answer. He smiled without warmth. "You should know, he's not the only one looking for answers. The Pentagon wants this case buried, but someone higher up is reopening it. If your name surfaces, your company burns." Cassandra's voice came out as a whisper. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus leaned in slightly. "Because you might be the only person who can save him." And just like that, he was gone, leaving her standing amid the cold elegance of her own empire, the echo of truth vibrating through the marble floor. Back upstairs, the penthouse was still empty. The envelope still lay open on the table, the classified sheet now crumpled in her trembling hands. Ryan had known. He must have come to her not just by accident, but because he needed her help. Or maybe because he wanted her forgiveness. Cassandra pressed her palms to her face, the weight of realization crashing over her. She remembered the night she first signed the Holt defense deal, champagne, applause, and the blinding satisfaction of victory. But beneath that triumph had been a choice, one she hadn't examined too closely. Profit over scrutiny. Growth over guilt. Now, the consequences had a name. Ryan Tate. Outside, thunder rolled again, though no storm had been forecast. The air itself seemed to shiver with warning. Cassandra lifted her head, resolve hardening in her eyes. If what Marcus said was true, then Ryan had carried the burden of her company's sins, and his own ruin, to protect something. Or someone. She would find him. And this time, she wouldn't run. Because beneath all the wealth and armor she'd built, Cassandra Holt knew one truth too well: some debts can't be buried. They only wait, patient as rain, until the day you're forced to face them again. She slipped the papers into her briefcase, her movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. The mask of the CEO fell away, leaving only the woman she once was, Cassie from East Point, the girl who fixed broken things because she believed they could still be saved. She looked out at the skyline, the city she had conquered, and whispered to the glass, "Ryan, what did they do to you?" Far below, a single black SUV waited at the curb. She grabbed her coat and moved toward the elevator, determination sharp as a blade. Because now, she understood, this wasn't fate circling back. It was truth, demanding to be seen. And Cassandra Holt, the woman who had once built her empire by silencing the past, was finally ready to listen. The city moved like breath, slow, heavy, waiting. By dusk, the Atlanta skyline was a mosaic of light and rain again, thunder curling at the edges of the horizon. Cassandra Holt stood at the base of a decaying warehouse on the outskirts of town, her heels sinking slightly into the damp gravel. The driver had begged her not to come alone. She came anyway. The address had been tucked inside the final page of Ryan's envelope, an old storage facility stamped Unit 317. Her company once leased this building years ago for testing logistics. Now it stood hollow, its windows boarded, its gates sagging under rust. Cassandra's breath clouded in the cold air as she stepped inside. The interior smelled of oil and iron. Pale moonlight sliced through the broken rafters, falling across forgotten crates marked with faded military serials. Her footsteps echoed. "Ryan," she called softly. The answer came from the dark. "You shouldn't have come." She turned sharply. He stepped out from behind a stack of crates, face shadowed, jacket soaked from the rain. His eyes met hers, weary, guarded, but alive with something sharper now. "You left the envelope," she said. "You wanted me to find this place." "I wanted you to know," he said quietly. "But not to follow. I had to." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "They'll come for me soon, Cass. Maybe for you too." Cassandra took a slow step closer. "Then tell me what really happened." For a moment, Ryan didn't move. The storm outside deepened, lightning flashing through the broken windows like strobe lights from a nightmare. Then he walked toward a crate, pried it open, and pulled out a laptop wrapped in military canvas. "This," he said, setting it on a table, "is the control hub from Caliber Dawn. The mission they said went wrong." He powered it on. The screen flickered, alive with encrypted data, coordinates, timestamps. Cassandra's breath caught as she read the header. Manual Override Authorization. Source: HDS Corporate Channel 7A. "That's one of ours," she whispered. Ryan nodded grimly. "The drone didn't malfunction. Someone in your company manually redirected it. Targeted a location we were securing for evac. They used my clearance code. My unit never stood a chance." Lightning illuminated his face. The anger, the grief, the exhaustion of carrying a truth too heavy to tell. "They blamed you," Cassandra murmured. He nodded once. "Court-martialed. Discharged. Told me if I spoke, they'd make it look like I was covering my own mistake. So I didn't. Until I found that data stream. The override came from Holt Defense's network, but the signal was ghosted through 6 firewalls. Whoever did it knew exactly how to bury the trail." Cassandra swallowed hard. "Do you know who?" Ryan's eyes flickered up to hers. "I have a name. Vance Delroy, Chief Systems Officer. Your right hand for the last decade." Cassandra felt the air leave her chest. Delroy. The man she trusted with every technical division, every confidential system. The one who'd overseen the merger that brought Holt Defense under her control. She shook her head slowly. "He told me it was just automation error. He said the Army signed off." Ryan's gaze softened, not with pity but with understanding. "You believed him. Because you wanted to." Silence stretched between them, taut, electric. Rain hammered against the roof, thunder rolling like a warning drum. Cassandra exhaled shakily. "Why come to me now?" "Because you're the only one who can expose him," Ryan said. "If I release this alone, they'll erase me. But if Holt herself brings the truth forward." She cut him off. "You'll be vindicated." He hesitated. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want, Ryan?" she asked, voice trembling now, though she hid it behind steel. He looked at her for a long time before answering. "For you to remember who you were before all this." The words hit her harder than she expected. She looked away, eyes glinting with a mix of anger and shame. "You think I don't know what I've become? I think you've spent so long surviving that you forgot how to live," he said softly. "You built an empire so no one could hurt you again. But somewhere in that climb, Cass, you started believing the same lies the men who hurt you did, that power means safety." Her throat tightened. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "That girl I knew, she fixed broken engines with her bare hands. She stood up to her father when he called her worthless. She believed in making things right, not just making things big." Cassandra's composure cracked, just for a second. "And what good did it do her, Ryan? The world doesn't reward good. It rewards control." He shook his head. "Maybe. But it still remembers grace when it sees it." Lightning tore across the sky, the warehouse trembling under its echo. Cassandra turned back to the laptop, jaw clenched. "If I release this, it destroys everything. The company, the board, the contracts, gone. Thousands of jobs. And if you don't—" She looked up. "Then innocent blood stays buried so you can keep your tower standing." The truth between them was unbearable. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her reflection flickered on the screen, half in light, half in shadow. Finally, she whispered, "Send me the data." "All of it." Ryan hesitated. "Cass." "Do it," she said, her voice hard again, but not cold. "If my company is built on lies, it deserves to fall." He nodded slowly, pulling a small drive from his pocket. "You'll need this. It decrypts the files." She reached for it, but before their hands could meet, a sound cut through the rain, the sharp hum of engines outside. Ryan froze. "They found us." Headlights swept through the cracks in the boarded windows. Black SUVs. Government plates. Cassandra's heart pounded. "Delroy." Ryan moved quickly, grabbing the laptop and shoving it into a duffel. They'll seize everything. We can't be here." Before she could reply, the warehouse door burst open. Armed men in tactical gear flooded in, shouts slicing through the thunder. "Federal agents! Drop the bag!" Ryan grabbed Cassandra's hand, pulling her toward the back exit. "Go!" They ran, feet pounding over concrete, shadows strobing with each flash of lightning. Bullets tore through the air, splintering wood and steel. Cassandra ducked behind a pillar, gasping, rain from the broken roof soaking her hair. "Ryan!" He turned, returning fire with the sidearm he pulled from his jacket. "Keep moving!" They burst through the rear door into the storm, the night alive with chaos. Tires screeched. Sirens wailed in the distance. Ryan shoved the drive into her hand, gripping it hard enough for her to feel the tremor in his bones. "If I don't make it, don't you dare finish that," she snapped. He met her eyes, fierce, aching. "Then promise me you'll tell the truth, no matter what it costs." Lightning flashed again, and for a heartbeat, the world went white. Then came the gunshot. Cassandra flinched as Ryan stumbled, clutching his side. His knees hit the wet ground. "Ryan!" She dropped beside him, blood mixing with rain beneath her hands. His voice was ragged. "Go. I'm not leaving you." He smiled weakly. "You already saved me, Cass. Just make it mean something." The floodlights closed in. Cassandra pressed the drive to her chest, tears mixing with the storm. And then, in the blinding chaos, she did what Ryan would have. She ran toward the truth. Sirens howled behind her. The city roared ahead. And in that storm, Cassandra Holt finally stopped being the woman who built towers, and became the one willing to burn them down. The morning came gray and cold, the kind of light that didn't belong to any season. Atlanta was waking, but too slowly, as if the city itself was holding its breath. From the top floor of Holt Tower, Cassandra stood alone before the vast window, her reflection framed against the skyline she had once sworn she'd own. Below her, chaos had already begun to stir. News vans crowded the street. Drones hovered like vultures. The story had broken overnight. Holt defense scandal. CEO confesses to concealed military cover-up. Every headline bore her name. But Cassandra didn't flinch. The drive Ryan had given her now sat in the heart of that storm, released to every news outlet, every oversight committee, every government body that had once praised her efficiency and discretion. She'd done it hours before dawn, sitting at her desk while the blood on her hands, his blood, dried invisible on her skin. It had taken only one click to unravel everything she'd built. Behind her, the penthouse was stripped bare. Files shredded. Art removed. Her name already being erased from the building directory below. She had signed the resignation papers herself. The city was moving on. But Cassandra was not. On the sleek marble table, a folded flag rested in silence, the one sent from the army that morning, still damp from delivery. The name stitched into its label made her chest ache, Captain Ryan Tate. They'd called it a containment operation gone wrong. No mention of why federal agents had been there. No mention of the files he'd carried, or the bullet meant for him. Only a statement that he had died in the line of duty, which Cassandra knew was their way of tidying up the truth. She reached for the flag, fingertips trembling, then stopped halfway. Her phone buzzed, one final message from Marcus Vale. "You did it. The investigation's open. The board's finished. But they'll drag you through it too. You're their scapegoat now." Cassandra typed back only 2 words. "Let them." She closed the phone and slipped it into the drawer beside the flag. The storm outside had softened to mist, the kind that carried the smell of new beginnings through the city's arteries. Cassandra moved toward the window, bare feet silent on the floor. The skyline blurred behind streaks of rain. She could still hear Ryan's voice, low, calm, impossible to forget. "Sometimes the past doesn't come back to haunt us. Sometimes it comes back to save us." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe it. A knock echoed through the apartment. When she opened the door, a young woman stood there, 20, maybe 21, uniform pressed, eyes bright but uncertain. The name tag read Tate. Cassandra froze. "Ma'am," the woman said quietly, "I'm Private Leah Tate, Ryan's sister." Cassandra's throat closed. I didn't know he had any family left. Leah nodded faintly. Just me. He talked about you, in his letters. Said you were the only person who ever saw him before the uniform did. The words broke something open inside her. Leah reached into her jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope, worn at the edges, stamped with military mail markings. He left this for you. Said if anything ever happened, it should find its way back. Cassandra took it carefully, the paper damp beneath her fingers. She closed the door gently behind them and motioned for Leah to sit, though the girl remained standing, rigid with the kind of grief that comes from trying not to show it. Cassandra opened the envelope. Inside, a letter, written in a rough, deliberate scrawl. If you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it through the fire. But that's all right. Some of us are meant to carry the truth just far enough for someone braver to finish the job. That's you, not me. Don't let them make you forget who you were. Not the woman on the billboards. The girl who fixed engines and believed in clean starts. I saw her last night, in the rain. You stopped. That's who you really are. If the world takes everything from you, let it. Just don't let it take your mercy. That's the only real power we ever get to keep. I'll see you when the storm's clear. Ryan. Her hands shook. The ink had bled slightly from the rain that must have caught the letter somewhere in his duffel. But the words were still alive, each one pressing softly into her skin like the echo of his voice. When she looked up, Leah was watching her, eyes shining. Did he suffer? The young woman asked. Cassandra swallowed. No, she said, her voice breaking. He saved me. Leah nodded once, jaw tight. Then maybe he finally found peace. The two women stood in silence. Rain pressed gently against the glass, a rhythm that felt almost forgiving. Leah saluted, crisp, proud, then turned and left without another word. When the door closed, Cassandra sank into the nearest chair, the letter clutched against her chest. For the first time in decades, she let herself cry, not the clean tears of regret, but the ragged sobs of someone shedding armor. Hours passed. The city turned to gold under the afternoon sun, light filtering through the mist like absolution. By the time evening fell, Cassandra had packed only one small suitcase. She left the penthouse key on the counter beside the flag. On the drive out of the city, she passed Holt Tower, her tower, standing tall and silent against the fading sky. For the first time, she didn't see glass and steel. She saw reflection. Her car turned off the freeway, winding through the outskirts until it reached the forgotten streets of East Point. The old houses were still there, weathered and tired but standing. She parked beside a narrow lot where a playground used to be, where she and Ryan once built forts out of scrap and dreams. She stepped out into the cool night, looking up at the bruised clouds. The smell of wet earth filled her lungs, grounding her. For the first time, she felt something close to peace. Cassandra walked toward the small mechanic's garage that still stood at the corner, rusted sign half-hanging, door open, a single bulb flickering inside. She paused at the threshold, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Still fixing broken things, Cass." The wind stirred, gentle and familiar. Somewhere, thunder rolled far away, not threatening, just a soft reminder. She unfolded the letter one last time, reading Ryan's words beneath the flickering light until they blurred into the paper itself. Then she set it down on the counter, beside a wrench and a set of keys. Outside, the first drops of new rain began to fall. And as the world darkened again, Cassandra Holt, once the woman who owned the city, stood beneath the storm not as a CEO, not as a savior, but simply as a soul learning, at last, how to be forgiven. Because some storms don't destroy. They cleanse. And sometimes, the people we lose don't disappear. They just teach us how to come home.